It is Saturday in the NFL. My two best bets for Saturday's slate of games. We got two games on. I got two picks for you. It is the final week of the NFL regular season. Hopefully, we can end with a bang. Of course, we got to do a recap of how we did in Week 17. Pretty solid week for us. Once again, a 7-4 week, not too shabby. Up a little over 2.5 units. We'll take that. Now on a 21-8 run, 44-19 since Thanksgiving. We've been dialed in. Hopefully, we can end the season strong. And obviously, we'll still have a bunch of picks in the postseason. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. My name's Austin. Welcome to the channel. Let's dominate. Now, we do want to talk about Parlay Play. They have a free square live right now for Gardner Minshew in this Saturday night game to have one passing yard. Definitely take advantage of that. We love Parlay Play. I'll have an entry at the end of this video using that free square, so take advantage of that. And the best part about Parlay Play, if you sign up using our code COS, they will match your first deposit up to $100. It's free money. Take advantage of it. All the details down below. Now let's dive into the picks, though. We're going to talk about two-player props. Then we're going to talk about the Parlay Play entry, and then we'll probably talk about the first game of the slate, the Steelers and Ravens game, because sketchy game, honestly. I mean, you got the Ravens, obviously, they're benching a lot of guys. Steelers still playing for stuff, but that game's expected like a 99% chance of rain. So honestly, there's going to be a lot of games this weekend that I punt on. That's going to be one of them. I'll talk about some leans I had at the end of the video, but I'm going to start with my first pick. Speaking of the free square, Gardner Minshew, he's my first pick of the day, over 236.5 passing yards, minus 110 on Bet365. Now, personally, I would play this to about 241.5. I was going back and forth on a bunch of different Gardner Minshew props to play with. I was either going to take his completions, his pass attempts, or his passing yards. Ended up going with the passing yards, so hopefully that's the one that hits, and hopefully the others hit as well. They kind of go hand in hand, but I really like Gardner Minshew on Saturday against the Texans defense. Now, Minshew took over the starting job for the Colts back in Week 6. That's when Anthony Richardson got out, was out for the year, and since then, he's over this line in only 5 of 11 games, and he has actually gone under in 3 straight with 214, 201, and 224 passing yards. So getting close to this line. We need about 240 passing yards to go over this, but on paper, I mean, he hasn't had a lot of great matchups, been involved in some blowouts where they're up by a lot of points early, and we know what the Colts want to do. They want to establish the run, and with Zach Moss probably back, imagine they're going to try to establish the run. However, this is a really tough matchup to run the football against. You think about Houston, allows the second fewest rushing yards per attempt, 3.3 yards per carry, and in turn, they allow the 8th most passing yards in the NFL. So, while I know they want to run the ball with Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, and those guys, I don't see them having a ton of success. I mean, sure, the Colts are a great running team, but every team has been tough to run against Houston, and I imagine they're going to have to lean on Gardner Minshew's arm a little bit more. Maybe they're stuck into some 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8, where they got to start throwing it, or maybe even they take some shots on first down because the Houston Texans are probably expecting them to run it. And we've seen, you look at Minshew's other props, kind of like to see, where do they think his completions, his pass attempts are at? You look at his completions props at 21.5, about minus 130, juiced on the over, and his pass attempts line set to 33.5, minus 110. He hasn't gotten really close to those lines the past few weeks, though he did go over in that Falcons game with like 39 pass attempts. Michael Pittman Jr., his number one guy, was not there. But 12 QBs this season have attempted 25 or more passes versus Houston. 8 of those 12 hit this over in yards. 8 of 10 guys had 30-plus pass attempts, and 8 of those 10 guys had hit this over. 10 guys had 30-plus is what I meant to say. Now, obviously, Minshew set to 33.5, and I'm not saying they're sharp on those lines, but they've had 17 weeks of research and stat data to kind of dive into them. They're pretty sharp in those pass attempts line. They're normally getting them pretty close. So if we see Minshew get close to the 33-ish pass attempts, I'm confident that he can, average, I don't know how many yards he needs to average per attempt, like 7 to get over this line. I mean, I certainly think he could easily do that. And I just don't think they have a ton of success running the football. We saw back in Week 2 when these two teams played up, Houston versus Indianapolis, Anthony Richardson did get hurt in that game, played the first quarter, got hurt. And then Minshew filled in for him, had a great game, 19 for 23 completions, 171 yards, 6 passing yards in the fourth quarter. They were up in that game 31-10. I believe Anthony Richardson had about 60 passing yards in the first quarter. So if you combine them both, they're right at this line. And that was a terrible game script for passing the ball. I think in this game with an over-under set to 47.5, the books are expecting some points. And I really do think CJ Stroud on the other side will be able to put up some points against the Colts defense. I think you're going to have to see Gardner Minshew throwing the ball. And if they get trailing, they're going to have to throw it even more. He has Michael Pittman Jr. back. I really like this line. I think this is a little bit too low for Minshew. Give me his over 236.5 passing yards as my first play of the day. Now, my second pick is going to stay in the same game. We're going to talk about a Houston Texan, and I'll talk about the Ravens and Steelers game at the end of the video. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. But I really like Devin Singletary's over 80.5 rushing plus receiving yards, minus 115 on DraftKings. Now, very similar. Well, I'd play this about 85.5 for those people out there that maybe don't get an 80.5 line. I really don't think it goes higher than 85.5. Now, like Minshew, I was really struggling with which Singletary prop to take. I'm confident Singletary has a good game. Obviously, it could be a complete flop. He could blow up and not do anything. But I'm confident in this matchup. He has a good game. The problem is I couldn't decide between his rushing yards, which is about 62.5, his receiving yards, which I think is a good receiving matchup, the rushing plus receiving, or his rush attempts at 15.5. I think they all are very good props for him. I end up settling with the rushing plus receiving yards because I swear I've been on the bad end of things where I just take rushing yards, he catches like a 30, 40-yard pass, makes the rushing plus receiving free, and then I end up losing. So I'll just take both of them. We obviously will be in, if it is a negative game script where they have to pass, still have a chance there, so we are kind of punting on that. But let's talk about in their first match. Like I said, that was a blowout. The Colts blew them out. And in that game, CJ Stroud, 384 passing yards. Texans only ran for 52 rushing yards, very imbalanced or, not balanced at all. They lost 31-20 and they trailed 31-10 going into the fourth. So they were getting smoked. They had no reason to run it in the fourth quarter. Now, in that game, the Texans obviously no balance on offense. And I imagine, while yes, that was in week 2, their team's a lot different from week 2 than they are, week 18. I still do think they're going to look at that game and say, hey, we need to have more balance. And I think that's something they've tried to establish over the past few weeks, especially with some injuries to their pass catchers, notably Tank Dell, now Pharaoh Brown is out as well. And so I think, or maybe Noah Brown, either one. I forget which one it is. Either way, I think they're going to have to lean on the run a little bit more. And I think that the Colts, knowing that CJ Stroud is kind of the backbone of this offense, probably going to play some too high safety looks and beg the Texans to run the football until they, run into the ground and they're like, fine, we'll switch our defense. But I don't think they really want Stroud airing it out against their secondary, which hasn't been great this season. And we've seen so far, Devin Singletary is the number one guy for the Texans. Last week, had a good game against the Tennessee Titans. They rested him basically the whole fourth quarter. They said, hey, Singletary, you're a guy. We need you ready and fully ready to go in week 18 because they knew it was going to be a winner go home game. And so that is exactly what this is. And I imagine when you're in your final game, it's a playoff game, winner go home, you're playing your studs. And Devin Singletary is much better than Dameon Pierce. He's shown that all season long, and I expect him to play well above 60% of the snaps. And so far this season, Singletary came into the year as a backup for Dameon Pierce. Then Pierce got injured, and you kind of saw Singletary take hold of this backfield. But in 6 games this season, when he played 60% of snaps, Singletary accounted for 26, 161, 118, 72, 170, and 86 rushing plus receiving yards going over this line in 4 of 6 games. I say 60% of snaps, bare minimum that he sees. But if you look at the 2 games he went under, one was the first game Dameon Pierce was out. They played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, one of the toughest rush defenses in the league. The other one was against the Jaguars, another very tough run defense. And he didn't really get many rushing yards, had a big day in the air. Now, obviously, I think he sees a lot more rushing attempts, which is set to about 15.5, that line. And I think he honestly has a good day in the air because we've seen the Colts, let's talk with just them on the ground. They allow the 3rd most rushing attempts per game in the NFL, giving up a lot of rush attempts. They allow the 15th most rushing yards per carry at 4.2. So teams have been able to run on them. And I think that we're going to see the Texans be able to run on them and run on them. And I think Singletary could honestly hit this over in just rushing yards alone. But it's also a good matchup for his receiving yards. Colts, 4th most receiving yards to running backs this season. Singletary also 3 receptions in 3 straight games, and 2 of those games came against the Titans, a team that allows the 5th fewest receiving yards in the NFL. So that's some bad matchups for receiving, still getting some looks, and with them banged up in the playmaker department, kind of going to need him out there. And I think that we're going to see Devin Singletary have a pretty good game. And here's a list of the last 9 running backs, 15 or more touches versus Indianapolis and their rushing plus receiving yards combined. Now, I can't guarantee Singletary gets 15 touches, but with the rush attempts line set to about 15.5, juiced a little bit on the over. And you also he doesn't have a receptions line, but I would imagine it's about 1.5 or 2.5. And we look, I think he's going to get 15 touches. You got to get the ball in his hands. You've seen Zamir White last week, 106, very inefficient game for him. Bijan Robinson, 122. Jalen Warren, the backup to Najee Harris, he had 68. Joe Mixon, 125. Derrick Henry, 120. The list goes on and on and on. Almost every single one of these guys cleared this line, except for Jalen Warren, a backup. I think at the end of the day, Devin Singletary is going to get the rock a good amount. Could go over his rushing yards and rushing attempts pretty easily. That would not surprise me at all in a plus matchup here. If this is a positive game script where the Texans are leading, he will be the guy getting the ball at the end of the game. He's just the one they trust the most and the one that they probably averages much higher yards per carry than Dameon Pierce. So I really like Singletary. I know a lot of people won't be on him, and it's kind of where I want to be. I really like his props though today on Saturday. I like his over 80.5 rushing plus receiving yards, minus 115 on DraftKings. And finally, let's wrap up the video with a parlay play entry talking about that free free square that they have for Gardner Minshew. Reminder, sign up using our code COS and they'll match your first deposit up to $100. I took Singletary's rushing yards in this one. Just, I want to take rushing yards. They didn't have a rushing plus receiving. I think they go hand in hand. Taking a Jonathan Taylor under 71.5 for rushing yards. Obviously, tough matchup against the Texans. Also, Zach Moss probably back after logging full practices on Thursday and Friday. Got Gardner Minshew in there for the free square for 0.5 yards. And then Ka'imi Fairbairn, another prop that I did look at it, is over 7.5 kicking points. A very good, hit rate against the Colts, team that gives up a lot of points to kickers. A lot of field goals. His field goal attempt prop is juiced at like 1.5 field goals made. That's pretty juiced. And I think they could score some touchdowns too. So I really like that four-legger. $10 turned into $100. I'll take my chances on it. Parlay play. A reminder, sign up using our code COS or the link in the description. They'll match your first deposit up to $100. We'll have Parlay play. We're going to be doing a lot more of their entries over there. And then finally, I'll talk about the Ravens and Steelers game because I know there's going to be some people that clicked on the video asking for my thoughts. Now, honestly, I don't see a ton of value on the Steelers props. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be in George Pickens. I don't really love his matchup. And honestly, if I had to pick a spread in this game, I would lean towards the Ravens. Obviously, the Ravens are resting a lot of guys, and I don't know who plays on their bench. However, this is still a Ravens team, and they're still a divisional rival. They're going to come in here trying to extinguish the Steelers' playoff hopes, even their second unit. They'll come out there and play pretty hard, and I'm confident they can do that and play pretty hard. Tyler Huntley has played in the NFL before. So honestly, if I were to take a prop, I wanted Tyler Huntley's rushing plus or passing yards, but there's no lines for that. That's going to kind of be the status quo for this weekend. You're not going to get a lot of lines for guys. So I will have my Sunday NFL video posted probably Sunday morning because I'm just waiting for lines for a lot of guys. So stay tuned for that. Definitely don't force a lot of picks into the slate of games, not just Saturday, Sunday. A lot of teams not trying. You probably won't get a lot of lines either. So my best bets video for Sunday plus some parlays will be posted Sunday morning. So definitely stay tuned for that. But as for Saturday slate, not going to touch that Ravens-Steelers game. Just too much rain expected. Don't really want to touch any of the props. It's just, I don't love them. I really don't love them at all. So I'm just going to avoid it. I don't really want to give out a pick I don't like and that I want to put my own money on. So I'm just going to avoid that one. Go into the Texans-Colts game where we got Gardner Minshew's pass yards and we got Devin Singletary rushing plus receiving yards. You guys have a wonderful Saturday. I'll see you guys back on Sunday with some more picks. Hopefully recapping a 2-0 day and hopefully dominating the final week of the NFL regular season before we get into postseason where every team's going to be trying as hard as they can. I'll see you guys in the next one. It's Austin signing out. Peace.